Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Director of ITU Radio Communication Bureau, Secretary General of APT, Chairman of the National Broadcasting and Telecommunications Commission of Thailand, President of IARU, Directors and Secretaries of IARU and the IARU regions, and all the delegates and observers from IARU Region 3 member societies. It is my great pleasure to formally welcome you all to the 18th IARU Region 3 conference. As we have all realized, our world has been shaken up by the arrival of the coronavirus since 2019, and this pandemic has forced us into a world only made possible through technology. Whilst we regret not being able to welcome you all here in person in Bangkok and take you for a tour of our beautiful city, we are delighted at having the opportunity to host this conference virtually for the first time in history via Zoom. Cordially, hosted by the Radio Amateur Society of Thailand under the royal patronage of His Majesty the King, RAST. This triennial conference is a meeting of all member societies and forms the supreme governing body of the IARU Region 3. Matters that will be discussed over the next 4 days will decide our future policies for our administrative, operational, technical, and financial matters, as well as to elect our officers for the next 3-year period. Before we move on to the opening address, let us observe a minute of silence in memory of those individuals who had greatly contributed to amateur radio, who are now a silent key. Notably, Dr. Larry E. Price, Whiskey 4 Radio Alpha, former ARRL and IARU President. Mr. Ronaldo Leandro, Yankee Victor 5 Alpha Mike, former President of IARU Region 2. Mr. Chandru Ramchandra, Victor United 2 Radio Charlie Radio, former IARU Region 3 Director. Mr. Sangat Singh, 9 Mike 2 Sugar Sugar, former IARU Region 3 Director. Mr. Halam Dani, Yankee Bravo 2 Tango Juliet Victor, former Chairman of IARU Region 3 Disaster Communications Committee. Mr. Arasu Manohar, Victor United 2 United Radio, former Coordinator of IARU Region 3 Monitoring System. Mr. Jojo Vicencio, Delta United 1 Victor Hotel Yankee, former Chief Operating Officer of PARA. Mr. Faisal Ajmi, 9 Kilo 2 Radio, former Vice President of IARU Region 1. A minute of silence from all of us, please. And may they rest in peace. I would now like to invite President of Conference, Captain Dr. Panit Jantarapakdi, Hotel Sugar 1 Alpha Alpha Zulu, to officially open the conference. ขอเรียนเชิญ Dr. Panit ค่ะ
Thank you, คุณนัทธนี Director of ITU Radio Communication Bureau, Secretary General of APT, Chairman of NBTC Thailand, President and Secretary of IARU, Chairman of IARU Region 1, Region 2, and Region 3, all IARU directors, delegates, and observers. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you all to the 18th IARU Region 3 Conference 2021. I would like to thank everyone here today for being part of this esteemed event. As the president of the conference, I am tremendously honored to see so many representatives from the Region 3 member societies and to have so many distinguished and high-level speakers on the agenda. I would also like to offer great thanks to all those who have been involved in organizing this conference under the excellent guidance of Dr. Jack Han Thongkham, Hotel Sugar One Phoket Victor Lima, President of RAST. What we see here today is testament to their hard work. Thailand hosts its first IARU conference 46 years ago in 1978. I must confess that when we were greeted by the request to host this meeting online instead of in person because of COVID-19, we were confident but somewhat nervous. Tasks that were normally done hand-on now have to be complete virtually. Will our society being the first one to host such conference online for Region 3 be able to pave the way and set the standard for perhaps the many more to come? I can only hope that whatever we may be lacking in this Zoom meeting, in order to satisfy the needs of the conference, we shall compensate it with our warmth and friendship, even if it's through the monitor screen. Ladies and gentlemen, this triennial conference is a task and opportunity for all of us. We look around the world today. It is a world of globalization, but yet still very much torn and fragmented. It reminds us of the importance of having a shared interest, ham radio, a hobby that acts more like a goodwill ambassador that binds all the nations and people of all color together. This conference is where we debate and discuss a shared vision of what we want our major radio to be. Not only us, but more importantly, for our future generations. A vision of how we can safeguard our frequency spectrum, how we can use our expertise in time of emergency and natural disasters, and how we can advance our understanding of telecommunications through the development of new technologies, which could one day form the foundation of a much larger worldwide application, in the same way that CW, RTTY, and packet radio did once for the internet that we see today. All this is possible because of the curiosity, inquisitive nature of ham radio operators and their willingness to explore and push boundaries given one's constraints. The most pressing matter now is how we can entice the younger generation to join the adventure we once shared, to create a platform of lifelong learning, and hopefully one that will take them on a journey much further than we ever dared dream. I hope you will find the next 3 days an engaging and productive experience. With that, I hereby declare the official opening of the 18th IARU Region 3 Conference 2021. Thank you.
ขอบคุณค่ะ Thank you very much. I would now like to welcome the Chairman of IARU Region 3 Directors, Mr. Vishnu Vijaya, Yankee Bravo Zero Alpha Zulu, for his opening address.
Thank you, Ms. Moon. The Directors of ITU Radio Communication Bureau, His Excellency Mr. Mario Manuich, the APT Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Masanori Kondo, Chairman of the National Broadcasting and Telecommunication Commission Thailand, His Excellency General Sukit Kamasundara, the President of International Amateur Radio Union, Mr. Tim Allen, V6SH, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. It is my great pleasure to welcome all the participants today for the opening ceremony of the 18th IARU Region 3 Conference 2021. I bid a very warm welcome to all the excellencies and delegates who took out their valuable time and join us today to be part of this conference. We are honored to have you all here with us. I feel great proud to say that this conference has been organized by Radio Amateur Society of Thailand. I would like to offer my regards to all the committee members who made this 18th IARU Region 3 Conference 2021 possible during these hard times. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the world is still battling against the COVID-19 pandemic. It is challenging situation. We have no other choice other than to hold a virtual conference. The virtual conference have given the opportunity for many member societies who otherwise will not have been able to participate in physical conference to take part in this conference. The conference will discuss about the policy matters, IARU Administrative Council matters, constitution of IARU Region 3, operational and technical matters, financial matters, and other important topics related to the amateur services. One of the important roles of the IARU is to protect the amateur radio spectrum, of ensuring that amateur spectrum doesn't become populated with other radio services with no allocation in that spectrum range. As a part of this role, it is important that IARU regional band plan and IARU regional structures to be harmonized. And also, it is well known that amateur radios are on the front line in providing emergency communication support whenever any disaster. This kind of public service should be improved day by day following the new available technology for the radio amateurs. Amateur radio today is widely popular among the baby boomers and X generation. As this baby boomer and X generation is out, we need radio amateur enthusiasts who would bring new energy into this hobby. We should think how many active operators will still be on the air in the next decades. The radio amateur world is continuously being affected by the world around it, by culture, technology, and also immerse of a new generation. And the amateur radio community is a diverse community filled with millions of vibrant enthusiasts, new or experience, old or young, computer science and electronics, satellites, chatting, contesting, emergency communication, excited, pessimistic, optimistic. What about what amateur radio will looks like in decades from now? No matter what they are thinking about, the world is changing so fast, but the amount of radio spectrum is not. It will be hard to argue that the spectrum reserved for amateur service should not be sold off to commercial users if hardly any amateur radio operators are taking advantage of it. So we need to keep our hobby alive and our spectrum safe, and we need youngsters to save amateur services. Member societies are called upon to actively take a part by promoting the radio amateurs to young people through their schools, colleges, research, and experimentation activities, etc. Our task right now is to able to encourage young people to explore the wide range of activities and experience available for them through the radio amateur. From the input document received, I'm happy to note that several input documents that were proposed by the IARU Region 3 member societies and IARU Region 3 committee chairs and coordinators were incorporated in the agenda and will be discussed during this conference. I am mindful that we have a comprehensive conference agenda ahead of us to ensure we fit out for the future challenges, and I hope this conference will be productive and worth your precious time. I believe we can if we do more together. Thank you very much. Have a day 3. This is Wisnu Yankee Bravo Zero Alpha Zulu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next, please welcome the President of IARU, Mr. Tim Ellum, Victor Echo 6 Sugar Hotel, for his address.
Honorable guests, the President of the Radio Amateur Society of Thailand, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It gives me great pleasure to bring greetings from the IARU International Secretariat and your other officers, Vice President Oli Garpestad, LA2RR, and Secretary Joel Harrison, W5ZN. I would say that one would not have imagined we would still be holding a regional conference by virtual means, but I would wager we're getting used to it by now. I think it speaks highly of all of us how quickly we've been able to adapt to virtual meetings and to move a lot of our business online. While holding a virtual meeting is not without its challenges, I also think it brings an excellent opportunity to have more of our member societies, more of our delegates, and more radio amateurs and guests participate in our discussions. Attendance at in-person meetings was a financial challenge for many of our members. We now have an opportunity to include more input into our discussions and participation from societies that might not otherwise have been able to attend the conference. I obviously would much prefer to be attending this conference in person. However, we must acknowledge the safety and health of our delegates during the pandemic, and I'm delighted with the virtual format of this meeting. My sincere hope is that we will be able to meet in the very near future. But in the interim, I'm very pleased that all of our member societies have been able to adapt and continue their work in a virtual setting. And I'm also pleased to be able to address you today and deliver some remarks at the opening of this conference. Amateur radio has changed and will continue to change. The IARU and its member societies must be ready to adapt and respond to that change. Now, I have said those words in my opening remarks to IARU regional conferences since I became president in 2009. And everyone seemingly agrees with my comments about change, but it is only recently that our changing environment has required IARU to focus on altering the way we work. I think we all realize that amateur radio has had many changes over the last century, but as amateurs, we are not always as quick to recognize those changes or respond to them. We have in the last few years had to focus on substantive changes in the IARU, Some of this change is evident in the way we operate. This will include such things that are readily obvious, a common and upgraded IARU website, which incorporates and links the regional websites, for example. We have changed the common branding of IARU so that our interaction with regulators at the international and regional level shows a common theme with less reference to our internal structure. Many of these changes have been transparent and readily noticeable to member societies and individual amateurs. Other changes are less apparent. For example, we have worked hard to come up with an improved and realistic spectrum goals for each WRC cycle. IARU representation for such meetings and regional meetings is much more coordinated with the establishment of a matrix clearly defining who is doing what to support our goals, and I know that includes many of you in Region 3. Spectrum sharing, especially in the VHF Plus range, will become necessary in the future, and something we are working on to have a coordinated worldwide response to what portions of that spectrum we can either share or possibly trade for additional spectrum. Now consider this, the amateur services have access to some 9% of the total spectrum from 144 megahertz up to 275 gigahertz. In today's world, that is a massive amount of spectrum for a relatively small number of users. Our allocations will be attractive targets to other spectrum users, and we will need to work very hard to maintain our existing allocations. As a corollary to this, member societies will need to embrace new technologies and encourage the use of VHF plus frequencies. We can no longer ignore the changing view by many regulators that spectrum must be shared where it is feasible, nor that the spectrum allocated to the amateur service, both HF and VHF plus, is untouchable. IARU will need the continuing support of its member societies, including individual volunteers, if we want to continue to grow the amateur service. While I firmly believe we have made IARU more cohesive and adaptable, as have our member societies, we still need to do more, much more. We are facing a generational and technical change in the amateur population. Such generational changes are not always reflected in our member societies or indeed the IARU. We witness technical changes in the amateur services, such as the popularity of FT8, but are often slow in adopting such changes into what amateur radio means to us. We continue to use paper QSL cards and rely heavily on the bureau system. Given the changes in postal rates and the cost of bureaus to member societies, query if we still want to be able to utilize paper QSLs in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time. Should we not be actively embracing such changes and dealing with them now? Now, I appreciate some of the changes are controversial, but we have to consider how they will impact amateur radio and how they will affect the way IARU works if we want to enjoy continued success. I would urge you to consider this during your deliberations this week and during the conference. Finally, I would like to thank with my deepest gratitude our host society, Radio Amateur Society of Thailand, for organizing this conference and associated meetings. The level of support and the assistance provided has been outstanding. I look forward to working with you this week, and I extend my personal support for what I believe will be a very good conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite the Director of ITU, Mr. Mario Manovich, for his address.
Mr. Masanori Kondo, APT Secretary General, General Sukit Kamasundara, Chairman of the National Broadcasting and Telecommunications Commission of Thailand, Mr. Til Eham, President of IARU, Mr. Vishnu Wisjaja, Chairman of Directors of the IARU Region 3, and Mr. Panit Chanbadki, Chairman of the 18th IARU Conference for Region 3. Dear colleagues and friends, a very good morning to all of you. I'm delighted to participate in the opening of this triennial conference of the International Amateur Radio Union Region 3. Despite the early hour for me in Geneva, I chose to deliver a live address to acknowledge my appreciation for the important role that amateur radio community plays in our society. Moreover, IARU and the ITU have been successfully working together for more than 90 years. Our joint work started in 1932, when IARU was formally admitted for participation in ITU activities. But even before that date, in 1927, the amateur radio received the first spectrum allocations by the ITU. Nowadays, this fruitful cooperation continues to the mutual benefit of both organizations. Over these years, IARU has become a reliable partner to the ITU, a valuable contributor to the studies of its ITU radio communication sector, and a long-standing actor in ITU's World Radio Communication Conferences. IARU actively participates in the activities of ITUR Study Group 5 and Working Party 5A, following the developments of the amateur and amateur satellite services and preserving their interests. During recent years, the radio amateurs are also taking part in Study Group 1 and its Working Party 1A meetings, especially in the discussions related to the interference from industrial sources, such as LED displays or power line communications, which are of great concern for the amateur community. Currently, IARU has 160 radio amateur associations in all 3 regions of the world. It assists the activities of more than 3 million licensed operators, promoting their interest and safeguarding the spectrum for the radio amateur community. Dear participants, it is difficult to overestimate the social and technical value of amateur radio. It allows to establish direct communications among people of different countries using their home equipment. Amateur radio helps users to obtain basic knowledge of radio wave propagation, antennas, and transmitters. It permits to make small radio experiments that sometimes turn into a life passion. Amateur radio also serves as a good educational platform for young people, engaging them into the fascinating world of wireless communications, giving a valuable practical experience to learn how radio works. Amateur radio is not only a hobby. It may play an important role in emergency communications and disaster relief operations. Over the years, many emergency centers are increasingly relying on radio amateurs since they are capable of providing connections when all other types of communications go down. The cases when radio amateurs can save lives are numerous. It may happen, for example, during hurricanes or earthquakes or fires, which lead to massive power failures and blockage of other means of communications. Another known example is intercepting the emergency signals from ships in distress and relaying them to the rescue coordination centers. I'm certain that in Region 3, having large oceanic zones and prone to extreme natural phenomena, the role of amateur radio in emergency communication is crucial. Ladies and gentlemen, the ITU recognizes the importance and social value of radio amateur communications and enables their operation by providing necessary frequency spectrum and stable regulations at ITU's World Radio Communication Conferences. I would like to share with you several WRC decisions related to amateur radio since 2003. The World Radio Communication Conference, held in 2003, reviewed Articles 19 and 25 of the radio regulations and harmonized the international regulations applicable to the amateur services. WRC 07 opened the frequency band around 136 kHz for amateur radio. WRC 12 allocated spectrum at 500 kHz band to the amateur service for assistance in disaster and emergency situations. WRC 15 made a new allocation to the amateur service in the 5 MHz band, bringing the propagation gap between the 3.5 MHz and the 7 MHz frequency bands. WRC 19 allocated the band 50 to 52 MHz to the amateur radio in Region 1, thus completing the harmonization of spectrum throughout the world. To my memory, WRC 23 is the only conference in the last 20 years that does not have an explicit agenda item for amateur radio. However, agenda items 1.2, 1.12, 1.14, 1.18, and 9.1 topics A and B are of vital importance for you. They consider new allocations in the bands used by the amateur services or adjacent to such bands. I would also like to make use of this occasion to inform you about ITU's preparation for WRC 23. On 6 August, the ITU Council took the decision that WRC 23 will be held in the United Arab Emirates, either in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, from 20 November to 15 December 2023. The Council approved the agenda of the conference, which is the same as the one contained in Resolution 811 of WRC 19 without any change. Dear friends, the COVID-19 pandemic has made a considerable impact on all our activities, including the ITUR preparatory studies for WRC 23. It is recognized that current virtual meetings may be less effective than in-person meetings. They have reduced working hours, and these working hours are not always convenient for many participants. There is also the lack of opportunities for informal discussions among delegates. However, ITU has put in place several mitigation measures to improve the efficiency of virtual meetings. These include flexible hours and establishing correspondence groups, which undertake a large part of the activities during the intersessional period. As a result, the ITU radio communication sector and its study groups continue the preparations for WRC 23 according to the original plan and respecting the deadlines established by the first session of the conference preparatory meeting in 2019. Dear friends, I've been working with the radio amateur community for many years and appreciate your enthusiasm, passion for radio, high competence, and professionalism. Clearly, the word amateur is a great underestimation of what you are doing. Usually, radio amateurs are born engineers with excellent knowledge of wireless communications and a strong aspiration to keep up to date with the latest emergency radio technologies. These capacities of radio amateurs bring valuable expertise and a positive effect to ITU meetings, ITUR study groups, and World Radio Communication conferences, where readiness to compromise, aptitude to learn, to listen to others, as well as ability to find sound technical or regulatory solutions count a lot. Dear colleagues, coming back to the triennial conference, I see that your agenda contains many important issues. It includes policy and strategy matters, technical and financial questions, nomination for the office of the directors and the secretary, preparations for WRC 23, and some others. Let me wish you every success in your discussion and a very fruitful meeting. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Manovich. Up next, please welcome the Secretary General of APT, Mr. Masanori Kondo, for his address.
Okay. Thank you, Kumpung. Captain Dr. Panit Chandra Hakdi, MD, the President of Conference, Mr. Vishnu Vichaya, the IARU Region 3 Chairman of Directors, Mr. Tim Elam, President of IARU, Mr. Maniowicz, Director, Radio Communication Bureau, ITU, General Mr. Sukit Kamasundra, Chairman of the National Broadcasting and Telecommunications Commission, Thailand, respected delegates. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm very pleased to join this opening ceremony of IARU Region 3 Triennial Conference. I'd like to thank Mr. Vishnu Vichaya, the IARU Region 3 Chairman of Directors, and Mr. Shizuo Endo, IARU Region 3 Secretary, to invite me to this important conference. Since its founding in 1925, IARU has worked consistently to defend and expand the frequency allocation for amateur radio. It has now been widely recognized that IARU represents the interest of amateur radio community. I'm pleased to note that today, amateur radio is more popular than ever, with more than 3 million licensed operators. Radio amateurs have a long and proud history of community service. As an example, we can see that radio amateurs have been involved in emergency communications and working with emergency services to provide communication when required. During a disaster, amateur radio operators can be a vital fast responders. Radio amateurs have played an increasing important role in providing communications to alleviate suffering in the wake of natural disasters. So distinguished participants, the Asia Pacific Telecommunity, APT, is the only intergovernmental organization in the Asia Pacific region on ICT/telecommunication. APT was established on Intergovernmental Treaty in 1979. Since its establishment, APT is working continuously to develop ICT telecommunication in the region. Co-creating a connected digital future in the Asia Pacific is APT's latest high-level commitment, which was stated in the Singapore statement adopted at the APT ministerial meeting held in June 2019 in Singapore. APT's activities have now expanded across 38 member countries and 4 territories in the Asia Pacific. Administrators, industry, and academia are participating in our activities. APT has worked closely with our members and stakeholders in promoting telecommunication ICT and global interconnectedness in the region, which has great potential to accelerate progress in society, to bridge the digital divide and to develop digital societies. Under the current strategic plan, APT has focused its work on 5 different pillars, namely connectivity, innovation, trust and safety, inclusion and capacity building, and collaboration and partnership. Respected delegates, IARU and APT have a long history of fruitful collaboration. APT has been inviting IARU to participate in APT activities for the last many years. IARU has played an active role in the APT conference preparatory group for World Telecommunication Conferences by submitting information papers and participating in the discussion on spectrum requirements for amateur radio services. Furthermore, IARU has been collaborating with APT in APT's initiatives and events related to disaster management and mitigation. We are strategic partners to fulfill the strategic action to provide support in establishing telecommunication ICT-based solutions to assist with disaster preparedness, risk reduction, and response to crisis management. I would like to mention that the past visit of IARU Region 3 President and Secretary to APT headquarters in Bangkok, Thailand, and had bilateral meetings with us. It was very fruitful, and I hope our cooperation will be further strengthened in the future. Finally, I wish you a success of this important conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kondo-san. And lastly, I would like to invite Chairman of the National Broadcasting and Telecommunications Commission of Thailand, General Sukit Kamasunthorn, for his address. กราบเรียนเชิญพลเอกสุกิตค่ะ
On behalf of the Chairman of the National Broadcasting and Telecommunication Commission and all the NBTC staff, I would like to congratulate the Radio Amateur Society of Thailand under the royal patronage of His Majesty the King of RAST for hosting the 18th International Amateur Radio Union IARU Region 3 Conference. The conference is taking place despite the ongoing COVID pandemic. With this online version, which brings representatives of IARU member society from many countries together for several days. Of course, it is unfortunate that the participants in this virtual conference will be unable to experience Thai hospitality and will not be able to enjoy the experience, the many attractions that our country offers to visitors. Indeed, I hope that everyone attending this conference will have an opportunity to visit Thailand for holidays or on business trip in the near future, once the coronavirus pandemic recedes. At the NBTC, we were well aware of the role that amateur radio can play during emergencies and of the many benefits the hobby provides to amateur radio operators and to society. And we are proud that Thailand is the country with the fourth highest number of licensed amateur radio operators in the world. Amateur radio know no boundaries, and the hobby is a global activity indeed. It is original social network that brings like-minded people with a common interest together and enables them to be interconnected. May I wish the 18th IARU conference every success, and I would like to take this opportunity. Thank you all the technical staff in RAS who have worked to enable this online format over the internet for this international events.
ขอบพระคุณค่ะ Thank you very much. We now have a short video presentation from RAST.
Welcome IARU Region 3 Committee and all the participants to the 18th IARU Region 3 Conference, proudly hosted this year by Radio Amateur Society of Thailand under the royal patronage of His Majesty the King. Thailand, formerly known as Siam, is located in the heart of mainland Southeast Asia in IARU Region 3, ITU Zone 49, and CQ Zone 26. When you visit Thailand, the land of smile, you will be greeted by our beautiful tradition, stunning natural landscapes, and countless number of amazing cultural heritage sites that are all waiting for you to explore. In Thailand, there are currently over 400,000 licensed amateur radio operators, controlled by the National Broadcasting and Telecommunication Commission of Thailand, or NBTC. Thailand has been assigned two prefixes, Hotel Sierra and Echo 2. Radio Amateur Society of Thailand under the royal patronage of His Majesty the King, or RAS, with the call sign Hotel Sugar Zero Alpha Charlie, was founded in 1964 In 1969, RAS became an official member of the IARU and subsequently hosted the first IARU Region 3 conference 40 years ago in Bangkok in 1978. RAS have also received the honor to host the Southeast Asia Network Convention or CNET for the total of 9 times, with the first one begin in 1972 in Bangkok and the most recent one in 2016 in Pattaya. In addition to our role at an international level, throughout our 50 years of history, RAD has maintained our objective, which is to support and promote amateur radio within the Kingdom of Thailand. We have organized and participated in numerous events and activities. For example, the activation of Hotel Sierra 10 King and Hotel Sierra 10 King / Mai Mai on Royal Thai Navy aircraft carrier, the HTMS Jackie Naribet, to celebrate the coronation of His Majesty King Maha Vajiralongkorn. RAS and NBTC presenting the call sign Hotel Sierra 10 Alpha to His Majesty the King at Dusit Palace. RAS organizing the basic, intermediate, and advanced amateur radio examination as well as the compulsory Morse code assessment at 8 words per minute for intermediate class license. RAS is both excited and honored to be given the opportunity to host the IARU Region 3 conference once again. Throughout this time, it is done virtually. We thank all the members, society for your confidence in us, and we hope once the COVID-19 pandemic has subsided that we will get the chance to welcome you all again in person right here in Bangkok.